Well, this past October and November, many of us here present met in small groups in what I call cottage meetings to share responses to a number of questions related to church life and to enjoy fellowship and to get to know one another better. There were 10 meetings in all, 9 of which were in person, and 1 of which was conducted online via Zoom. In all, 52 people attended, almost all of them members of the church. 2 or 3 folks attended more than one meeting. Church members were asked to respond to these 5 questions. What first brought you to church? What is your favorite thing about church life? What would you like to see more of? What things have you enjoyed participating in? And what social justice initiatives would be most likely to elicit your participation? The discussions were lively and informative, and I think most folks enjoyed them quite a bit. And there were snacks. I'd like to share with you today some, but not all, of what I learned. It will take a series of gatherings such as this at a worship service or an all-church meeting to dig into all the results and to explore how they inform us as we seek to move forward through these 2 years of interim ministry. The first and most important thing that I learned did not come as much of a surprise. People here love their church. What do you love most about it? About 70% of the folks answered the people, or the community, or the spiritual community, or some formulation like that. There are few things more heartwarming than being with a group of people who want to be together. This is a place where people want to be on a Sunday morning, at the worship service, and at the coffee and fellowship hour that follows the service, and at the various events sponsored by the church and in the fellowship hall. There is something about being in community, especially what we call spiritual community, that warms the spirit and enlarges the heart and generates energy for most of us. When folks love the spiritual community of which they are a part, they feel comfortable and confident, and this helps explain why the services here are so robustly participatory. The voice of the congregation, both in song and in responsive readings, is strong and confident, an indicator of a healthy church. In my opinion, this joy in being together, this joy in creating the spirit of community, is the church's greatest asset and must serve as the foundation for growth and sustenance. It's a place where people genuinely care for one another and seek to support one another's well-being. Spiritual community is one of the pillars that supports a healthy church life, but by itself, it's not enough. In my understanding, church life exists in 2 dimensions. One is as a spiritual community, the other is as a religious institution. What do I mean by religious institution? The church exists as a physical edifice completed in 1891 and transported in 3 pieces to this location on the corner of South Main Street and Nickerson Avenue in 1907. And it exists in a legal capacity. Its tax-exempt status derives from the fact that it's a religious institution. As such an institution, we have bylaws to govern our business and behaviors. We have a book of policies, and what a big binder of policies it is. And attached to the policies are procedures which guide how the policies should function. Because there is a physical plant to maintain, we have a building and grounds committee. Because funds are needed to effectively maintain the institution, we have a task force or task group to manage a pledge campaign in the spring, a fundraising and planning committee to assist in fundraising efforts, and an investment committee to ensure the continued financial health of the institution. These are all necessary groups or committees if we hope to keep the church flourishing, not only as a religious institution, but as a spiritual community. Then there are the committees that bridge both functions. The Membership Development Committee works to connect visitors and friends to a path towards membership if they are looking for a reliable spiritual home. A welcoming team, a hospitality team, and a program planning group all work together to welcome newcomers, make newcomers and old-timers alike feel welcome and at home, and develop programs that strengthen the sense of community. These groups serve the spiritual community most directly, but they also undergird the institutional structure. Similarly, though there is no communications team, our tech team, stream team, sound team, and webmaster combine to do the work of both keeping ourselves connected with one another and keeping ourselves connected to those in the larger community who want to know more about us. It's a mistake, I think, to drift into the either-or mentality of thinking of churches either as spiritual communities or religious institutions, though I understand there are reasons that we are inclined to do so. Most of us, I think, love the idea of community, but distrust the term institution. Who, after all, wants to be institutionalized? If we think of ourselves as a spiritual community, though, there's not enough, if we think of ourselves only as a spiritual community, there's not enough structure to keep ourselves bound together, either practically or in terms of finance, or organizationally, in terms of how committees and teams work together with the parish committee to get done the work of the church. If we think of ourselves only as a religious institution, there's a danger that we become so bound up in rules and regulations and pedantic restraints that the vibrancy of the spiritual community is lost. When I'm confronted with this kind of a difficulty in reconciling things that seem to be opposed, I find it helpful to think in terms of dynamics and form. Our interactions here on Sunday are most dynamic as we socialize before and after the service. The order of service gives form to the way we worship together, holding the dynamics in a way that, if successful, feels ultimately satisfying and leads in its progressive, step-by-step way to the spiritual growth of the individuals here and the community they combine together to make. Too rigid a form stifles spiritual dynamics. Too loose a form doesn't allow us to conceptualize, formalize, and organize our thoughts and feelings into something of substance for us to consider over the course of the week that follows. Form and dynamics. Dynamics and form. As I said at the outset, most folks at our college meetings cited the feeling of community they find at church as the most compelling thing about membership. And I think it will come as no surprise that nobody said, the religious institution, or the bylaws, or the governance structure. These are things that are acknowledged as necessary, mostly, but hardly anything to get excited about. In a conversation I had last week with someone who knows about these things, these are elements that conform to the father's job in the old division of labor in the home. Those elements related to spirituality conform to the old understanding of the mother's job in the home. Interesting. Is mother providing nurture and father providing structure? I think that's a model of patriarchy that we do well to challenge. In the dimension of church we call spiritual community, we do well, I think, in caring for one another. We need to ask ourselves the question, though, how do we best take care of the institution? We ask this question because we know the more solid the institutional structure, the more efficient the communication, the more organized the relations between committees and teams, the healthier the church will be as a whole. and we all want a healthy church. According to the list in our church directory, we have no fewer than 20 committees, teams, groups, or task forces in charge of supporting and promoting the mission of the church. Each one appears to function as a separate entity with only the vaguest connections to other entities, except for the few: religious exploration, music, the investment committee, and social justice, who submit regular reports to the parish committee. Many of the groups, in fact, are closely related and function to other groups. For example, the investment committee, the fundraising planning committee, and the stewardship committee, to say nothing of the treasurer, all serve in capacities that strengthen the financial health of the church. Would it strengthen communications for all to work together under the aegis of a finance committee? Similarly, the tech team, the stream team, the sound team, and the webmaster are all aspects of communication, internal and external, if they group themselves under the umbrella of a communications team. Wouldn't that make sense? It seems to me that the mission of the church would be best served by encouraging teams and committees with related functions to join together in groups that foster communication and cooperation. It might not be necessary for every group to report on their progress to the parish committee each month, but the church would function most efficiently if most groups did. In addition to our general distrust of institutions, we UUs tend to resist bureaucracies as well, and with good reason in many cases. Terms like chain of command make us shiver. We don't want anyone commanding us, and we don't want to be part of a chain, thank you very much. We understand the necessity for a governing structure, but we don't quite trust it. We are independent-minded, despite our stated belief that we are part of an interdependent web of existence. Curious, isn't it? When I was in divinity school, my fellow UU seminarians and I referred to our theological stance as based on a hermeneutic of skepticism. We interpret things through a filter of skepticism. And it's fine to insist and to examine our institutional structures with a wary eye, but it's not so fine if that's the stage at which we stop. At the first UU Society of Middleboro, the parish committee, with input from various teams and committees and individuals upon occasion, makes the decisions it thinks will best benefit the mission of the church. In accordance with our democratic polity, parish committee members are elected by members of the church. They are entrusted with decision-making to the extent that we extend that trust, and some of us do more readily than others. One of the things that became clear to me from my participation in the cottage meetings is that there is a tension between those who are content with the pastoral style model of church, where the minister plays a central or at least significant role in most dimensions of church life, and those who are more comfortable with what is called the family style model. These are concepts that were first promulgated by Arlen J. Rutledge in his book, Sizing Up a Congregation for New Member Ministry in 1986, and further explored by Alice Mann in her book in 1998. There are various understandings of what constitutes a family-style church. My sense is that the family-style culture works best in a group whose size does not exceed 30. What do we mean by family-style culture? Say you are at coffee hour on a Sunday, having a chat with your friend George, and the conversation drifts to those unsightly holes in the wall above the door that leads to the fellowship hall. You know, George, I'm awfully sick of looking at those holes every Sunday after the service. I have some plaster left over from doing Cherry's room in the fall. What do you say we find some time to patch things up? You've got that 12-foot ladder. I've got the patching compound. There's a can of paint in the storeroom. we can get it done in no time. And sure enough, by the following Sunday, the holes are patched, the wall freshly painted, and we can hope that no one fell off the ladder. Inspired by the nicely repaired entrance to the fellowship hall, the next Sunday, Becky approaches Linda with the idea of having a bake sale as a church fundraiser. Linda is enthusiastic and immediately enlists Martha and Sarah and Frank. They've worked together before, so things move along quickly. Cakes and pies are baked, coffee and tea are brewed, cookies are offered 3 for $1, and a good time is had by all. And a tidy sum is raised. All well and good. In the family-style model, things are done informally. People come and go as they please, and if there are loose ends left unattended, well, that's part of what it means to be a family. When a church is a bit larger, though, things can't be so simple. One of the complaints that was voiced at one of our meetings was from someone who started a project, gathered her friends, and then found out that someone was already at work on an almost identical project. Why can't we have better communication, she wondered. At another meeting, one of our longtime members expressed frustration at having to get permission from the parish committee, whom, if I remember correctly, he charged as being too involved in everything. Both of these complaints emerge from a condition that Alice Mann describes as the in-between church. Our church is large enough that it functions best using the pastoral style model, but the family style culture, which is so comfortable for some people, is hard to give up. This is something that the church as a whole is going to have to work through, I think. When I served the UU Church in Bowling Green, Kentucky, we ran into some of the same issues. The church was founded as a fellowship in 1962. So for 47 years, it was a lay-led institution before calling me its first minister. You can imagine how entrenched many of the attitudes and behaviors were, especially among the matriarchs and patriarchs who had kept the church running all those years. Some of the long-time patterns were quite functional. Others were still cherished, though they had outlived their usefulness. Considering new ways of doing things was hard. Here, if Becky and Linda decide to hold a bake sale, I hope they would check with the fundraising planning committee, if not the parish committee, to see if another fundraiser was already scheduled for that month or that week. And I hope that George and Frank would ask the parish committee's permission before embarking on the much-needed patching job. It might be that it was already being considered as part of a larger project, or that the paint they had in mind had been sitting for too long, or that there's a soft spot in the floor that won't support that 12-foot ladder. I remember a time in Bowling Green when one of the members was fuming because she thought it was ridiculous to have to get permission from the board of directors for a project she had in mind. She was convinced that she was dealing with some monolithic wall of authority, like something out of a Kafka novel. After attending a board meeting to make her case, she spoke to me the next week. They're just regular people. They're the same people I sit with in the sanctuary on Sunday. That's how strong our feelings about authority figures can be. Even the authority figures we ourselves have voted for, like Lila's mother in today's All Ages story. Well, to sum up, I believe our church functions best with the pastoral style model. It is my experience that the role of the minister is honored and respected here. And I do believe that you have a good, solid, trustworthy board of directors, even if you call them a parish committee, and I have to find how that term came about. And I believe that the impulse to want to accomplish things by way of the family style model is a good one. I just don't believe it's the proper fit for this size church. To that end, I've taken the initiative to construct a proposed organizational chart, which I think would best serve the church's efficiency and communication. I've submitted it to the parish committee for review. And I'll be speaking with committees and teams to get their input, because after all, this is a democratic institution. I hope the parish committee will be engaged in those conversations as well. My role as an interim minister is to do two things primarily, I think. One is to help the church assess its past, its present status, and its future prospects. The other is to prepare the way for a smooth and healthy transition for the next settled minister you choose to call. This is how we care for the institution. When you have questions, concerns, and even complaints, remember that I am at your service.